start 200 onion seeds today and talk through everything you need to know on how to start onions, care for them, and grow them in order to have really big onions in the summer to harvest and store long-term to enjoy throughout the winter. My name is Sam. I garden here in Michigan, Zone 6A, and it is time to start my onion seeds. So I want to take you through this process. This is the first video of, we'll say, like the seed starting series. And I'm going to walk you through my soil mix, what I'm using, how I'm starting them. Hopefully this is helpful for you if you want to grow onions this year, and specifically onions from seed. I will grow onions from seeds rather than sets or starts, because when I decided to grow onions for the first time last season, all of the research led me to, if you want the biggest onions, you need to do them from seed. So that's what I did last year. I was pretty successful. I grew 66 onions. I cured them. We actually just ate the last onion from last year's harvest about a week ago. So the end of December, which is pretty good for growing onions. I mean, I harvested them last July and then we finished them end of December. So we had 5 months of garden onions. So this year I'm growing double the amount, hoping I can get a year's supply. And I'm just really, really excited to get started. This is the first crop that's starting for the 2025 garden. So I am totally excited and ready to go. Because I am in Michigan and I'm in a northern state, I grow long day onions and intermediate day. If you also live in a northern part of the country, like I do in Michigan, you can do long day, and you can probably also get away with an intermediate day variety like I do. If you're in the middle of the country, you should probably be growing intermediate day. You might be able to get away with some long day and short day, depending. I've definitely just like test it and try it out, or find some other gardeners that are in the same zone as you and chat with them on what they grow, because that's really the best way to get advice on what's gonna do good in your zone. And then if you're in like the southern part of the United States, short day is the way you wanna go. Onions are specific, like onion varieties will specifically say if they're long day, intermediate day, or short day. These ones that I grow from Botanical Interest say it right on the front of the pack. I'll make sure that I link these ones below. So it's super easy to make sure you're growing the right ones. And the reason there's like long day, intermediate day, and short day is because onions will bulb based on the length of the day. It's really dependent on how much sun they're getting to bulb properly, like per that variety. So you want to get this right when you're picking your onion seeds, or you're trying to figure out what onion variety to grow. I'm sitting about 18 weeks before my last frost date. So the seed packet advises that I should be starting these seeds 10 to 12 weeks before my last frost. However, I started them about 15 or 16 weeks before my last frost last year. And I actually had a lot of success with those, but I think I could get them even bigger if I gave them more time to grow, which is why I'm starting just a few weeks earlier this year. And just like looking at what other gardeners in my zone are doing, some people are starting them as early as end of December. So I really think this is gonna be the move this year, starting them early. If you're not in the same zone as me and you're like, well, when do I start my onions? Just check out the back of a seed packet. It's gonna say when to start them. And then I would add a few more weeks on, like I am, like this one says 10 to 12 weeks. I'm doing 18 weeks. Honestly, 15 or 16 weeks is probably fine. 10 to 12 weeks might even be fine too, but just somewhere in that range is gonna be a good spot for you to start. If you want more information on when I'm starting all of my other crops this year, you can either wait for the YouTube videos to come out on them, or I will link my garden planner below. I shared that in my last YouTube video when I gave a whole overview on what I'm growing this year and when I'm growing it this year. And a lot of you guys grabbed that garden planner and really enjoying it because it lays out everything I'm growing, the plant spacing, when I'm starting it inside or when I'm starting it outside. It's just a really good way to track and see an overall timeline for gardening. So I will leave that in the description of this video if you want to check that out. Let's get into planting. What I like to do is I'm just taking this big bin and I'm going to mix in some seed starting soil. This is an organic seed starting mix that I just got from Menards. Seed starting mixes differ from like a potting mix or a raised garden bed mix or like other soils because they're super light and just like so airy. And the seedling, when it's germinating and it's like pushing out of the seed, it needs to be able to work through the soil to set root and then pop through the top. So you want a really, really light seed starting mix. If you don't have access to this early on, I know when I went to Home Depot, they didn't have any seed starting mixes out yet. So I did grab this from Menards. I'll link one in the description from Amazon that I think looks good that I actually ordered to use later on this season. But if you can't get your hands on these and all you can find is like raised bed soil or potting mix, go ahead and use that too. It's gonna be just fine. this shouldn't be a barrier for you to not try gardening this year or not try starting seeds inside. It's a nice to have, but it's not a must have. People start seeds outside in compact soil all the time and they do just fine. So don't let it stop you if you can't find something like this. Also in with my soil, I'm gonna do a cup of worm castings. This is just another like organic way to add nutrients to the soil. And I'm gonna do 2 cups actually. Just mix that in, and then I'm also gonna do a little bit of fertilizer. Now, onions are gonna be the only crop that I actually mix fertilizer into the seed starting soil, because a seed itself has all the nutrients it needs to germinate, emerge, and last a little bit. And then you can start fertilizing with like liquid fertilizer, add fertilizer later. However, my onions are gonna stay in these little 6-cell seed trays until I plant them outside. So they're gonna be in these for about 12 weeks. So I wanna give them some extra nutrients in the soil just to help them out. Some people say if you mix fertilizer into the seed starting mix, you could like burn the seedlings by overwhelming them. I added fertilizer to all my seed starting mixes last year and I didn't burn any of my seeds, so it's completely fine. And I'll link this one below. The directions on the back just say, I think it's like a 1/4 cup for 5 gallons. And this is 2 gallons of soil. So I'm doing just under a 1/4 cup. I'm just gonna mix this all up. Should probably get like a spoon. I did put a question box on my Instagram earlier today asking you guys what you wanted to know about growing onions. So if you submitted one there, I will do my best to answer all of those questions throughout this video. If you're not following me on Instagram, you definitely should. It's just @morethangardening. I'll leave a link in the description. I like to put those question boxes out before I record these videos. That way I can answer specific questions and make sure I'm hitting those points for you guys and everything you want to know. So once this is nice and mixed, I need to add a little bit of water. This bucket here, and I'm just gonna add a little bit. The trigger for a seed to germinate is temperature and water for most seeds. Some seeds also need light, like snapdragons, for example. You just put those seeds right on the surface because they need light to germinate. But onions don't. They need temperature and water. So if you're ever wondering, like, why does a seed not just germinate in a pack? It's because it doesn't have water. It's dried out in there, and it might not be the right temperature. So you need your soil to be wet. I like to mix the water in with the soil before I put on these 6 cells, because if you put them in when the soil's dry, it's just gonna fall pretty much right out the bottom, and it's not gonna be compact. So the second you go and water it for the first time, all the soil is gonna drop, and you could also risk washing away your seed that first time you water the soil. So I like to just pre-wet my soil. I like to add water to my soil in the beginning. That way it's nice and moist and ready for the seed. And you don't want to totally soak and oversaturate it. You want it to like clump up and like hold its structure a little bit. Okay, I think this is good. Let me just show. See how it's like staying like clumpy, like it's holding that moisture, but it's not like dripping out. It's a really good consistency for your seed starting soil. I start all my seeds in these 6 cells. I will link these below. They're from Epic Gardening. I have a discount code if you want to use that and save a little bit of money on them. I like these because they are a rigid plastic. They're not like those flimsy ones that you see sometimes. So they're gonna last a long, long time for me. And they also have holes at the bottom, and then they have holes on the side. So the holes at the bottom are great when you go to plant out your seedlings. You can just push up on the bottom and the entire block of soil will just pop out super, super easy. And the bottom holes are nice for bottom watering. You'll see I put all of these seeds on one of these 10-20 trays. They're super sturdy. I like these too. And then when I water my onions and anything, I just pour water directly into this tray, and then the water gets sucked up through these slits in this bottom hole. And bottom watering is like the ideal way to water your plants because it makes the roots stretch down to get to that water, which creates a much stronger, deeper root system. Also, especially in the seedling stage, you really don't want to be watering on the top, because if the top of the soil gets wet, that's where a lot of like you can get like weird mold stuff and then disease and fungus, and your seedlings are so susceptible to dying early on. And moisture is one of the biggest culprits, like moisture on the soil, because that's where the funguses live. That's where fungus gnats like to burrow and lay eggs and cause a bunch of problems. And bottom watering is elite because you keep that top layer of the soil dry, and these 6 cells make bottom watering a breeze. I'm just packing these in, and I'm packing them in really tight because I want a ton of soil in here. Again, these onions are gonna live in here for like 12 weeks. So I want them to have as much soil and as much nutrients surrounding them as possible. I'm looking through the questions here from Instagram, and a couple of things that got asked is, how do you make sure your onions store for a long time after you harvest them? So like I said in the beginning of this video, I harvested last season's crop in July, and we were eating them until last week, and they weren't even close to molding. They weren't even close to going bad. We just strictly ran out of them. And what worked for me really well in order to get the onions to last long in storage is, one, making sure you're buying a seed that is specifically for storing onions. You want a storage variety. Not every onion is meant to last a long time in storage. My onions that I grow, I think it says they can last up to like 6 months or even 6 to 9 months. So if you were planning on growing a lot of onions to last you like through the winter like I am, make sure you're picking up a storage variety. Another question I got is if I do 1 onion per cell or if I like sow in clusters. You'll see that a lot of people will grow like 1 billion onion seeds in like 1 4x4 pot or like 1 6 diameter pot, and they'll just sow all their onion seeds in there. They'll grow like a ton of them, like I mean like 60 plus onion seeds in 1 pot, and then when they go to transplant them, they'll just separate all those seeds out and plant them. I really prefer to do 1 onion per cell. So that way at the time of planting, because I am planting so many, I'm doing 2 8x4 raised beds full. I'm targeting like, I'd like to do 100. I don't know if 100 is gonna fit. I'm starting like 200 seeds. So I can try to do 100 per bed. I think I'm probably gonna end up more with like 75 per bed, but we'll see once I go to plant them out. But when I'm planting out so many onions, it's so much easier for me. I found last year to just have 1 per cell and just pop out each individual cell and just set it into the hole in the raised bed and then plant it out that way. I did have multiple onion seeds per cell last year. Like I would do 1 tray with 1 per, and then just to experiment and play around, I would put like a handful of seeds in one of these. And then when it was time to plant them out, I had to separate, like the action of separating each seedling and then planting it out. It was just so tedious and so annoying and like so much extra work to have to separate the seeds that when I planted 66 onions last year, the thought of doing that to every single onion is just daunting. And I do not want to do that. I want to save time when I'm planting out, especially like time is so valuable in the spring. When you're planting your seedlings out, I have a million things in the garden going on. The last thing I want to do is spend time like separating seedlings. But the downside of that is I'm taking up a lot of space under my grow lights, and I'm taking up a lot of soil, and I'm taking up a lot of 6 cell trays to fit 200 onions where I could fit them in say a space this big. I'm going to use a space that is 3 of these trays. Now I have the room, so I'm okay with that. But if you don't have the room, you might want to go that other route and really, really densely plant like a ton of onion seeds just in like 1 pot and then separate them later. What I recommend you do if you've never grown onions is kind of do what I did last year and try out both methods. I would plant some where they're separated out per cell like I'm doing, and then plant some where they're all in 1 pot and figure out what works best for you. That's the best way to do gardening, and honestly doing life is just trying it for yourself, seeing what works, and then do that, because different things work for different people. What works for me might not work for you. I have 3 full trays now filled with soil ready to go. These trays hold 12 of these 6 cells, so I have 72 cells per tray for a total of 216, which is definitely more than I'm going to plant. However, not every seed cell is going to germinate, and I also like to just have extras. That way when I go to plant them, I can pick the biggest ones and plant those. And last year I ended up giving a ton of onion seedlings to my parents and my mother-in-law for her garden, and I'm probably going to end up doing it this year too. So I'm growing extra just to have that little bit of insurance. So I'm going to do yellow onions. I do the yellow sweet Spanish bulb onions from Botanical Interest, and then I'm doing the Cabernet reds from botanical interest as well. I'm gonna do 1 full tray of the yellow, 1 full tray of the red, and then this last tray will be half and half. And then just so I can keep track of what is what, I like to just write on a painter's tape what I'm growing. So this one is gonna be my red onion, so I just wrote red on here. And I like to do this better than like those individual little like stabby plastic things. I just think this is easier, so I'm gonna go red here. That way I know it's red onions. This one I'll go yellow. And then since this one's half and half, I'll do red and I'll divide it, say this half yellow, and divide it on this other half on the side. This next part is definitely easier than the last step. It does take a while to get these all filled up with soil. This now is finally just putting seeds in your cells. So general rule of thumb for seed starting is the depth of your hole needs to be like 2 to 3 times the size of your seed. Onion seeds are really, really small. So these holes aren't super deep, and they make little like seed depth tools that you can like stab, and then there's markings on it to know exactly how deep you're going. I find that just a push of a finger is enough for me and works for me. You can really overanalyze and make this way more technical than you need to if you let yourself. Just remember that all of gardening is just replicating what nature already knows how to do. And it's not perfect out in the real world for any of these vegetables to grow. So it doesn't need to be perfect here. I promise. There's some leftover from last season. I had taped them shut. I'm just gonna open them up. And I like to do like 2 seeds per hole. Not every seed's gonna germinate. So I do about 2. These seeds are really, really small. I don't even know if you can see them. They're so tiny that it's gonna be hard to get exactly 2 in each. I might end up going like 3, 4 even might slip in some just to make sure that I get them in there. And then I will thin them down to the strongest seedling once they germinate. But for now, I'm gonna try to just get 2 onion seeds per hole. Oops, I think I just dropped one already. My red onion seeds in, so now I'm just going to kind of push that other soil over top that I just moved out of the way, and I'm gonna kind of press it a little bit. Now I'm just gonna do that same process for the yellow onions. Poke my holes, drop my seeds, cover them up, and then I'll show you what's next. Then any leftover seeds that I have, I just pour right back into the seed packet and then tape it up, and then I will use them again next year. And just to make sure that my soil is super, super moist to encourage these seeds to germinate, I'm gonna give a good spritz right on top as well, especially because that top layer of the soil is going to be the first one to start drying out. I want to make sure it's like extra wet. These are all ready to go. I'm just going to put my leftover onion seeds back in here before I forget. Close this up. This is like my favorite way to organize seeds. It's like a lot of gardeners use this. I did not invent this, but I'll link this below. They're for photos, like a photo organizer. So I just like to keep all my seeds in here. It's nice and clean and organized. And then last step before I take these inside under the grow lights, I need to add humidity domes. That way I can keep this soil nice and moist and warm, and it just encourages germination. If you're getting like spotty germination with your seed starting and you aren't using humidity domes, you might want to start. You just put these on, and then as soon as about 50 to 60-ish% of your seeds are sprouting and germinating, you can take them off. So you only use them for like a week or so. I got these ones from Menards. They're not the nicest ones, but they're like $2.50. They're super flimsy, but they work. They worked for me last year. I'm probably gonna get some from Epic Gardening soon, just so I have them for when I start the rest of my seeds, because the ones they have are a lot nicer. But this is what I have today. This is what I'm using. You can also use cling wrap. I did that last year on a lot of my seedlings that I started inside. Just like a layer of cling wrap will keep that moisture in just fine, but these will do for me. So let's take these inside and let's get them under the lights and talk a little bit about how I will be caring for them from now until when I plant them out in the garden. These are just gonna go on my grow shelves under the lights. And I like to keep the lights just about an inch above these humidity domes. And again, like I said, these are gonna come off once about like 50 to 70% of the seedlings start germinating. And then these lights are gonna stay on for like 16 hours a day. I really recommend you get automatic outlet timers, and then you can set exactly when you want the lights to turn on and off every single day. That way you don't have to come and turn them on in the morning and then turn them off 16 hours later. It just automates the whole thing and makes it so much easier. And then this is where all of my onion seedlings will be until I plant them into my garden in April. I like to get my onions out into the garden about 4 to 6 weeks before my last frost. Onions are great because you get to start them really early, which I love, and you get to get them in the garden really early, way before all those summer crops. So it's just a nice way to kick off the gardening season. So like I said, once you get them started and they're under the lights, things to look for them sprouting and germinating. Once you get about 50 to 75% of them emerging from the soil, you can take these humidity domes off. After about a week, you're gonna wanna give them a little bit of water. You can just take a cup of water and pour it directly into these trays, and the soil will suck the water right up. And then you'll also want to add a little bit of liquid fertilizer to your water about every 2 weeks. I'll link one below that I like to use for my onions and just all my seedlings that I do inside when I bottom water. And once they get going, if you're wondering when they need water, a really easy trick is just take your finger and dunk it into the soil. And if it's dry about an inch down, then they need a drink. If it's moist right below the surface, then they're all set. I think about every 7 to 10 days is a good routine to be on to water your onions inside, but if it's really going to depend on like how thick your soil is, how well it retains water, the humidity in your house. So make sure you're doing some tests on your own, like the one I just had, to see if it needs water or not. And that is it on how to start onion seeds. I hope this video was helpful for you. And if you're gearing up to start your onions for the first time or just get them going for the season, I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments. If you like this video, please leave a like. Subscribe to my channel for more gardening content. I'm going to take you guys through the entire season, exactly what I'm growing. I think it's going to be super, super fun just documenting everything. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at morethangardening, TikTok at morethangardening_. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.